There is a version of you that still lives inside yesterday. Not metaphorically, biologically. It wakes up before you do. It scans the room before your eyes fully open. It listens for tone before words even form. It notices silence and decides whether it is safe or dangerous. A closing door downstairs makes your chest tighten. A sudden shift in someone's mood makes your stomach drop. A slightly delayed reply to a message feels like rejection. And the strangest part, you don't even think about it anymore. It just happens, like breathing, like survival. But here is the unsettling question. What if your mind never left the environment it grew up in? What if a part of you is still living in a house that no longer exists? Why does the human mind stay trapped in emotional patterns long after the danger is gone? Why do some people become hyper-aware, overly responsible, emotionally distant, or constantly anxious, even in safe environments? Psychologists have a name for this hidden blueprint: childhood adversity imprinting. It is the way early emotional environments reshape the developing brain, quietly, permanently, and often invisibly. And to understand it, we need to ask a darker question. Why does the brain adapt to pain and then refuse to unlearn it? Segment 1. The brain that learned too early. When a child grows up in chaos, emotional unpredictability, neglect, criticism, or instability, the brain does something extraordinary. It adapts. But adaptation in childhood is not gentle. It is survival-driven restructuring. At the center of this shift is a small, almond-shaped structure deep in the brain, the amygdala. The amygdala is your threat detector. It asks only one question: is something wrong? In a stable childhood, it learns balance. It activates when there is real danger, then shuts off. But in an unstable environment, it learns something else entirely. It learns that danger is normal, so it stays active, constantly. This is why adults who endure difficult childhoods often describe feeling like they are always waiting for something to go wrong. Their amygdala never fully powers down. Meanwhile, another structure, the hippocampus, responsible for memory and context, begins to encode emotional chaos as baseline reality. So instead of remembering, that was a stressful moment, the brain records, this is how life feels. And then there is the prefrontal cortex, the rational decision maker. In chronic stress during childhood, its development can be disrupted, not damaged in a dramatic sense, but reshaped. It becomes less influential in calming emotional reactions. So later in life, logic arrives late to emotional storms. It tries to say, you are safe now, but the amygdala responds, we've heard that before. This internal conflict creates something subtle but powerful, a nervous system that reacts faster than thought, and that reaction becomes personality. Segment 2. The invisible survival personalities. From the outside, people who grew up in difficult environments often look fine, responsible, independent, mature for their age. But these are not always personality traits. Sometimes they are survival strategies that never shut off. One of the most common is hyper-independence. This is the belief, deeply encoded, that relying on others is unsafe. As a child, depending on unpredictable caregivers teaches the brain a brutal lesson. Self-reliance is survival. So as an adult, even help feels uncomfortable. Even love feels like risk. Then there is hypervigilance, a constant scanning of facial expressions, tone shifts, micro pauses in conversation. The brain becomes a social threat detector. Neuroscientifically, this is the amygdala working overtime, paired with an overtrained salience network, constantly asking, what changed? What did I miss? There is also the pattern known as fawn response. Instead of fighting or fleeing, the individual appeases. They become highly attuned to others' emotions, often sacrificing their own needs to maintain emotional stability in the room. Not because they are kind in a simple sense, but because at some point in childhood, peace depended on pleasing others. And perhaps the most misunderstood trait, emotional numbing. When feelings were too overwhelming or unsafe to express, the brain learned to disconnect. Over time, emotional suppression becomes automatic. Not sadness, not anger, just flatness. Psychologists studying adverse childhood experiences, a study, notably the work of Dr. Vincent Felitti, found a direct correlation between early trauma exposure and long-term emotional regulation issues, physical health risks, and stress response dysfunction. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget, and it expresses it in patterns that feel like personality, but are actually history repeating itself. Segment 3. The adult life it builds. This is where the paradox deepens even further, because what once felt like survival in childhood often transforms into identity in adulthood. The nervous system, having adapted to instability, does not simply switch off when safety appears. Instead, it recalibrates safety itself around what is familiar. So calm does not register as calm. It registers as uncertainty waiting to reveal itself. This is why many people shaped by early adversity unconsciously seek intensity in relationships, work, or thought, not because they dislike peace, but because peace does not provide feedback. And a brain trained in vigilance equates lack of feedback with hidden threat. In relationships, this can create a cycle that is difficult to name but easy to feel. Emotional closeness may feel grounding at first, but as soon as consistency appears, the nervous system begins to scan for disruption. A subtle withdrawal, a shift in attention, a moment of silence that feels heavier than it should. And so the mind begins to preempt loss by imagining it early, not as drama, but as prevention. This is the architecture of hypervigilance, a system built to detect danger before it fully forms. It was once protective. It allowed the child to read rooms, anticipate moods, and minimize harm. But in adulthood, that same system can become overactive, interpreting ambiguity as threat and neutrality as rejection. Even the body remembers. Muscle tension held without awareness, shallow breathing during quiet moments, a subtle restlessness when nothing is wrong. These are not random sensations. They are physiological echoes of a past where stillness was never guaranteed to remain safe. Over time, the person may begin to confuse exhaustion with stability, because exhaustion feels earned, measurable, and real, whereas calm can feel suspiciously unstructured, as if something is missing rather than something has been achieved. Yet beneath all of this lies a truth that is often overlooked. These patterns are not signs of damage in the simplistic sense. They are signs of adaptation, intelligent, responsive, and deeply human adaptations to environments that required constant emotional calculation. And perhaps the most important realization is this: what was once necessary for survival does not always know how to stop when survival is no longer the task. The twist: this is not only them. But this is where the story turns inward, because this is not only about extreme childhood trauma, it is about scale. You do not need severe neglect or obvious instability to develop these patterns. Sometimes it is subtle emotional inconsistency, a caregiver who was loving one moment and withdrawn the next, a home where emotions were not explained, only reacted to, a childhood where you had to read the room to stay safe. And if you think carefully, you might notice echoes of this inside yourself. That discomfort when someone is upset and you feel responsible. That urge to fix everything immediately. That tension when things are too quiet, too still, too uncertain. Even everyday experiences, work pressure, social expectations, relationships can activate ancient wiring, because the brain does not separate past from present as cleanly as we believe. It only recognizes patterns. And once a pattern is learned early enough, it becomes invisible. You don't feel it happening. You just feel like, this is who I am. So the question is not whether the past shapes the present. It does. The real question is, how much of your current personality is actually you, and how much is a survival response that never found an exit? And if the brain can learn fear this deeply, can it ever learn safety just as completely? Or does a part of the past always stay alive, quietly steering the present from behind the scenes? Because sometimes, the most dangerous thing is not what happened to you. It is what your mind decided to become because of it. And that is why you need to watch the next video.